Yo, what is going on, guys? Godrekton here today, bringing you a new Renekton related guide video. Within this video, we're going to be talking about ability maxing, but most specifically, we're going to be emphasizing on why we should be maxing W right now and how to use it to its absolute fullest. So for most of you that are already Renekton players, you guys already understand that over the years and ever since that Renekton's been played, Q, E into W max has been by far the best ability max you could possibly get. This is simply because your Q already does so much damage, it already gave you a lot of healing, and then after that you would also max the E, which would then give you armor shred, additional dashes, and also additional damage. W was always known as the 1-point wonder, more specifically by Soul Renekton only, which kind of taught me that back in 2014 when I did watch his videos. So being that as a 1-point wonder, I never really thought much else about it, and throughout these years, it kind of remained the same where W never really gave me a reason to max it. That was until last year. Last year, Renekton's W received a change. So if you guys don't remember or know exactly what they did to Renekton W, essentially they increased his damage just by like a few extra damage, which still is something, right? But that's not the focus on the build. The focus here is the fact they changed the cooldown. So initially, this became a nerf change to Q max simply because that the cooldown went from 13 seconds at level 1 to 16 seconds. A 3 additional seconds is a pretty big deal on Renekton that always wants his W up, and it is his main form of actually being able to do damage. So being that they changed this, it was quite a nerf on the patch. However, when we look at it more closely, it actually becomes a buff. So if we compare them side by side, we have W here, which went from 13 seconds, 12, 11, 10 to 9, to now 16, 14, 12, 10 to 8. So we're already getting like a second difference by the end of it. But it's also the fact that the main nerf is in the beginning because Renekton's W was kind of strong. But if we put points into this and actually utilize it a bit differently, we can actually abuse this tech pretty hard. So upon looking at these changes, they do look like quite enough, as our old W started from 13 and now it is 16 seconds. And while it is, this is why we simply do max it too, and with playstyles such as Blair Rune King existing, and other items that synergize really well for Renekton's W, it actually became a playstyle where we could start putting points into it. With the additional damage out of W as well, this is also a little caveat into being able to allow us to do more damage, and being that our cooldown comes up more often, we're able to even do a lot more damage than that. And the other reason that we are choosing W right now is simply because Renekton's Q has been massively nerfed. And as I show you even more changes by Renekton Q, it just becomes pretty abysmal. The more you look at the Q ability, the lesser need that you have to actually keep maxing this. And this is where W actually ends up outshining Q in a variety of different matchups. Like each change you're going to see is literally nerf after nerf on this champion. Renekton Q also did get an extra buff on the Q where the cooldown was lowered by 7. So being that it is already 7 seconds and then we can max into something else that gives us more damage and also times well with our Q and E, it just is kind of a no-brainer, right? Like we can use this to our advantage. Renekton's biggest weakness has always been his cooldowns. If Renekton could somehow bypass that, the champion would be even stronger in the right hands. Being that there are plenty of builds that give you a lot of cooldown reduction, this is even more of a no-brainer not to try. So all in all, W max actually has become pretty popular amongst a lot of one-tricks. More specifically, the one-tricks have inspired me to also play this a lot more recently is 3-1 Warrior, the NA god himself, and then we also have Xiaoyu, which is another high-tier god Renekton player, probably one of the best on the planet. And these both have gone W max for quite a while. I've definitely been very behind myself to go to the tech, which you could also account to be being stubborn. So some of you guys might have noticed too from my gameplay that I used to advocate putting an extra point into W. Now, I did this because originally with the change that they did, I thought that if I could get 2 seconds down on my W, that it would be pretty good to time up with the rest of my abilities and how Renekton used to function. Little did I actually think about though, was that I could put a few points into my Q and then max my W, which is where the core roots of the build are going to come into. So being that I could do this instead and then go straight into W max on a playstyle that also allows me to go Blair Rune King Rush, Eclipse, all these full AD attributes, it's kind of like a no-brainer not to do that. So the more I started trying this, the more I started to actually realize I was starting to actually feel enlightened about this. And this is where I had a really big game change in all my approaches to matchups. The fact that I can just go W max now, after my 3 points in Q, I can quickly outtrade anyone. I can always beat people to their cooldowns. I can reliably go my Blair Rune King into Eclipse simply because that I have lower cooldowns. The problem before with full AD and some of these playstyles was that I wasn't getting enough cooldown reduction. But now that I'm able to actually get even more from the base of upgrading my ability and then going these items, it just remains a gigantic game changer into my playstyle, and it has allowed me to actually rack up so many wins recently, even fixing my account win rates. Overall, I am quite a big believer of W max now, and in this video too, I'm going to be showing you guys why you should also be doing that, and also joining on this wave of actually abusing W max. So now that I've explained like the introduction stage of the video, let me explain what the purpose of W max actually is. So W max allows us to actually snowball a lot harder in games, allowing us to also create more opportunities against melee matchups, and allows us to have more utility and damage throughout the game. The fact that we can have a lower cooldown W simply means that we can use it more often. It's pretty basic logic, right? But if you think about it too, on a champion that carries all his damage on one ability, it remains a really big thing to always have that W up at all times. When you go into these dragon fights, when you're going to these team fight skirmishes, wherever it might be, right? If you can have that extra W up, this can be the legit changer that you needed. You can simply get 2 Ws in a fight on a carry if you need to. You can get another W up as well. Like, you can literally time 3 to 4 Ws within a fight. And the more lower cooldown you have, you're going to time even more the longer a fight goes on. Being that your W can also go as low as 5 seconds, even to like 4 seconds, it is actually crazy. And then every time you can like do a combo rotation, you're going to have W right back up. And Renekton already being able to one-shot and do all these crazy combos that gaze damage off in seconds, the higher cooldown variant of builds is actually even more insane with this alone. So basically, the fact that we can do this more often just leads us into a very high snowballing playstyle. And when you consider there are champions that have lower cooldowns too, we can end up actually triumphing against those with a faster ability rotation with W coming back up. Now, I know what you also might be thinking, right? If we're maxing W, how are we going to actually wave clear? Our wave clear comes specifically from our Q and E abilities, and you might even like add an item to that. And if we're already going a Blair Rune King playstyle too, essentially what the build is also kind of made for as well, how are we going to wave clear whatsoever? Well, that is where, like I already talked about, we put 3 points in Q, and then we max W right after. Again, this was also inspired to me by 3-in-1 Warrior. He's been advocating for me to do this for quite a while, and when you look at the abilities and what it's actually giving you, it kind of makes a lot of sense to actually just put 3 points into it. With all the Q nerfs that Renekton has received over the years, simply maxing it to its fullest really doesn't matter in my opinion anymore. So the whole idea is we simply get an extra 90 damage by putting 3 points in Q on our empowered Q, and then we just simply stop maxing it. If we were simply to put 2 more points in our Q, it's only giving us an extra 90 damage, and for a playstyle that is solely abusing a Blair Rune King as well, and other items like that, it remains quite redundant to even put more points into a Q when we are emphasizing on one ability. And typically, even with just 3 points in Q, we can Q the wave, we can last it then, or the minions, or even use our E to wave clear too. So technically, our wave clear isn't even hurt from this playstyle alone. So simply going 3 points into W has remained a really good strategy, with basically not really many weaknesses as far as the wave clear is concerned. Another purpose too about W max is because Renekton has so many build paths and like playstyles, that also is more open to being able to play Blair Rune King and full AD builds like I've already mentioned. So the fact that we can get a W up more often on an ability that is 225% of an AD ratio, on top of also applying on-hit effects such as the 12% of current health damage on Blade of the Rune King, you know, it's just insane. We could constantly proc it no matter what. And that's also another gigantic purpose into the whole idea of why we're doing this in the first place. So when you do juxtapose this to a bruiser style, it might not benefit so much. However, for the utility reasons of also doing that, you're able to still get a lot of W's off against potentially a team comp that you need to peel against, and also just have more W's up to stun the enemies trying to engage your carries. Overall, there's a lot of flexibility in how you can play this ability max, but more so, these are like the main reasons on why we do it. So now that I've explained the purpose of W max, let me explain the pros and cons of the playstyle. So firstly, why is W max actually OP in my opinion? Because our W timing comes up more often, that simply means we can abuse the bulk and every other slight of damage that we have in our kit a lot more often. And when you factor this into melee matchups, anything where we're going to be in someone's face and fighting them, this allows for more consistent damage and gives enemies less counterplay to actually deal with us. So therefore, we have more theoretical damage. And when you also count that we have PTA as well, that means even more PTA procs can be utilized, meaning even more damage as well. So when we add full AD build into the mix of this whole mindset of what WMAX is, it just creates even less opportunities for enemies to deal with us and win any 1v1s whatsoever, especially on a champion that already snowballs so much harder. The next point that we can also account into WMAXing is the fact we have more counter offense versus low cooldown champions and also champions with X Factor's abilities. X Factor abilities simply mean like a Jax E, Fiora W, Gangplank W, anything that can kind of like counter our W, right? Maybe even like Garen W. If that simply means we can have more Ws up within a fight, their cooldowns are way much higher due to the fact that these abilities are all max last. When you consider Jax, Fiora, all these matchups, they typically put in their points and their stuns at like their last rank. When it comes to Renekton can get up to 3 Ws up in a fight against these, while they can only get up 1. Now, of course, this does depend on the whole items that you're going, but in theory, that if you are 1v1, you'll gain even more strength against them because you're actually able to get your main ability up. Even though you're able to get your main ability up, this simply means you have way more ways to play a game and beat these champions that are also known to heavily counter you as the game goes on. Another reason is that W also applies more utility for skirmishes and fights, like just anything in general, right? If we can also get more Ws up in a fight, that simply means the enemy has less counterplay to engage on our carries, gives less counterplay to hide from our Ws, less counterplay to also kite us out and finish us off within a fight. So all in all, it is just very versatile and just very strong for that reason. So now that we've talked about the pros, let's talk about the weaknesses. So, like I've already mentioned, the wave clear is definitely a weakness, right? Like, there are some situations where I want a hard shove and there's a fight coming up, and I'm unable to do that, meaning that I miss out on minions and potentially XP that allow me to get an extra level up within the fight. But while this could be a trade-off, and it's very rare that this happens, it is still something to worth consider. And while we can still wave clear if we, like, you know, play properly and have our Fury, we do also have to use extra Fury to simply wave clear, which can also be a big problem. But again, I'm just throwing it out here to play devil's advocate on why this could have a weakness too. The next weakness too is that it's pretty high skill cap overall, this whole playstyle, because our Fury has to be saved on our W. And being that it's saved on our W, we cannot really waste it on our Q in fights. Now, we can use it on E for Armor Shred, of course, which is typically what I like to do. But when it comes to actually using Fury on ability, we completely negate the fact that we won't even need to use our empowered Q whatsoever. And while for some it could be good, for others it could be very bad because we miss out on some damage, we miss out on the fact we could get a bigger heal, which could cause problems in fights where we need to get that clutch heal against being near 4 people or so, just trying to get that max healing cap. But being that it's a lot weaker, we're unable to really do that, and we need to only prioritize our W and specifically our E. So while it might be a weakness or even a pro to some, I'm just throwing it out there that Q is pretty useless, and you only want to be trying to build up Fury towards your W. And if you can't do that, you're going to have a lot of problems because Renekton is pretty dependent on his W. And if you're unable to build up Fury properly to that ability and play around it, you're going to be very weak within the process. If you don't know what you're doing with WMAX, and if you don't know what you're doing playing AD builds or any aggressive styles, you simply really won't have a higher success rate with this because, again, this is all high theory and min-maxing on the champion. All this has a reason to work. All this has a style that needs to be played with it. And if you're just going to go into it like it's a normal Renekton playstyle, you're simply just going to have the wrong idea, and you're also going to have the wrong impression and just the wrong experience itself. It's also very important to know all your mechanics and all your combos to fully utilize this, all the build paths, just everything, right? Like if you're a really good Renekton player and you already know what you're doing, then I simply recommend that this is a very good thing that you could be doing. But I just do want to throw it out there that this idea matters, and if you don't know what you're doing, I would simply stay away from it until you do know what you're doing. Now, the next con is that while I've talked about it being pretty good against melee champions, I haven't really talked about ranged as much. Now, this is due to the fact that against range, it doesn't really work well, to be quite honest with you. Like, if we consider that most of the lane were getting poked and they're already staying out over range, simply maxing ability for a time where we can't really fully utilize it is going to remain pretty weak. Because of this scenario, we're not really able to really utilize it that much, as we're not really able to get into range consistently without taking a lot of damage and maybe even griefing our early game before that. The whole idea of Qmax as well is more of a safer approach to a game. Qmax is very versatile. You can do it against anything, right? And against range, getting that additional heal, getting that wave clear is pretty big assets to playing against ranged. And because we're taking ourselves away from that too, it is often leaving us in a very weak position. And most of the time too, if you do jump onto the ranged champion you're playing against and you W them, it's going to be enough damage as it is, and most of the time we're only getting 1 W off anyways within a fight against them. Because that's all it really takes if you're going to kill them. Aside from that, I think against range, Q is just still the predominant ability max if you're going to consider that. A quick thing that I do want to mention too in this video is that I do have an ability max tier list right here. So if you guys like genuinely want like an understanding of what matchups to do this, where it's going to reliably work, then on the screen here will be some matchups where I recommend it. This is kind of like a general like understanding of like when I can go Q max, or instead when I want to go W max. So if you want like a little guideline too, this is what I also recommend too within the video. So in conclusion, now that we've talked about the pros and cons, I do want to just like go over why would I max W over Q. So to simplify it, guys, you would get more damage on your W, being that your abilities can abuse PTA, by Ruin King, or other like items like that more often. And in a fight as well, you're able to get more Ws up, meaning more damage overall. So if you're looking for more damage, this is definitely the highest damage outcome. And I'm not even looking at damage as in terms of the ability like base damage either. I'm completely looking past that. I'm just looking at what it actually gives me. And when you're timing like damage per second in a counter and all that, having a W coming up more often is simply just logic, right? That you are going to be doing more damage with it. The next reason too is that we have more utility. Utility simply meaning more ways to play the game. Having more stuns give us more ways to be either a team fighter, being able to peel for our teammates, or we can be very aggressive and go for one-shots. Or even just like being a duelist. Like all this in consideration, it's allowing us to give us a lot of flexibility within the game, and we have more ways to actually play. The next reason is that it also gives a higher snowballing power, and for the people that want to end games and also have a higher chance of being able to utilize Renekton to his fullest, or their fullest rather. Snowballing power is a pretty essential thing on an early to mid game champion, and you want to abuse all those variables as much as possible. Another reason is that we have an easier time against melee champions such as bruisers and fighters, being that we can have more Ws up, we can have more ways to peel against these champions like Jax, Fiora, anything that wants to try to like fight us constantly and have like these abilities that can change the game. The fact that we can have more that are up just simply means we have more power to actually beat them as well. And finally, the last reason is that it gives a better playstyle pattern for an aggressive playstyle. If we're playing full AD, having more Ws means more damage. Like I've already mentioned for the 10th million time, but I'm just getting into your head that it is more of an aggressive style that you want to play. While it does have a use of being very supportive too, you have to factor in the reasons that is it going to be better early game? Are you trying to farm? Are you trying to play range, push in waves, get to team fights first? Having a Qmax is more reliable for that and going Godrekton, but if you do want to play for like straight damage, aggressiveness, and just have that carry power that you've been looking for, then I definitely recommend W in these situations because you're going to be getting a lot more out of Renekton's kit. So now that we've explained all the main things about it, let me just show you some gameplay clips of where W is actually helping me in certain scenarios, because I know some people can be skeptical. I know some people can be stuck in their ways like I was. Like again, I was very stubborn to actually change my playstyle to play with W max. Like I had 3-in-1 tell me for over a year straight that I should be doing it, but I simply didn't do it because I didn't feel like it was worth it. And I always just factored in like getting the Q for my heal and my wave clear. But I didn't really look at the bigger picture of it. And I think it's just due to the reason I wasn't playing enough Renekton as well through last year. But being that I'm trying to like get better at my champion too, trying to like enhance myself even more into the whole, what more can I do as someone with 5.5 million mastery points, I decided to give it a try and I haven't regretted it since. And I only recommend you guys to also do that because the more you're able to actually try stuff and implement things in your gameplay, the more knowledge you're going to have and the more success you're also going to have game to game. If you have more tools in your toolkit, that simply means you're adaptable to every scenario that's in front of you. And being that you're more adaptable, that simply means you can climb a lot higher, you're able to do a lot more things, and also get past your let's say your cap as a player. Like a lot of people can be capped at certain points and not knowing what to do. But because you're trying things and also trying to learn, it's going to give you a bigger knowledge bank and also give you ways to climb a lot easier and also have more ways to also understand the game. So also just like summarize too on like how we play this is that early game, through our first 5 levels, we simply put points in our Q. We get 3 points in our Q, and then we go 1 point W and then 1 point E. And then after level 6, we just put all our points into W. And by that point, like around the 9 to maybe like 12-minute mark, we time our first item with a Blade of the Ruin King, or Eclipse as well. Once we get this item, our W damage and snowballing is going to be even more prevalent, as we're able to constantly proc it. We're able to constantly abuse this high AD ratios that we have as well. And that basically gives us a lane kingdom approach that no one can really get on our level at these points, allowing us to be the ultimate duelist at this point. And when we come to team fights too, we're going to have heavy damage on our W and also time up a lot of Ws within the fights. Once mid-game also rolls around, typically in a playstyle that I would play, let's say Bulk Eclipse, I would then get a Sojin if I need the extra moon speed, or I just want extra cooldowns against lesser tankier opponents. Otherwise, if I feel like the enemy has tankier opponents, I'll get a Black Cleaver. Both of these items give a lot of haste, both meaning that I get a lot of ability haste in conjunction with that. And for the reasons I've already discussed, like, it's going to make a big help when it comes to team fighting and dueling. After this point, I can then finish off my build with 2 other items in a Deadman's or Force of Nature if I want to be tanky. Otherwise, I can go with Sojin or Sherelda's for even more ability haste and power. And from there, I'm just ultimately the best AD dueling champion within the game. Like, I've not really met a matchup yet that can really play against me. And even when you get to level 18 without a W max, you can typically feel that the fact your abilities roll up more often just makes you an even more devastating threat towards the game. Because our Q really doesn't matter maxing it as well, we're able to get way more power in the fights, giving us even bigger power spikes. So every time like we go into a fight too, we have a lot more versatility and variety in what we can do, allowing us to kind of bypass this whole idea of Renekton gets outscaled, and also allows us for a higher success rate within the overall game. But with all that being said, that pretty much sums up the whole video. I've talked a lot about this video, about ability maxing. I hope this has really helped you guys out, understand how and like why this is good. I hope it also gave you a new perspective on how to play Renekton. That is pretty much my goal and intentions here with these kind of style videos. So in conclusion too, if you want to go Qmax, that is still completely fine. That is completely fine. You can still do that, but just consider that Qmax is more towards playing against ranged champions and also playing wave clear based playstyles. We're playing like a Ravenous Hydra or even like a Godrekton, trying to wave clear, push in tanks and then proxy. Qmax is a better ability max here as it gives us more power towards that, and then it allows us to go into our bruiser playstyles like normal. But if we're looking for an extra power on the full AD playstyle, giving us more dueling and one-shot power, giving us just overall a better snowballing chance on a style that needs to thrive and like it's very feast or famine, then that's why I recommend W max. And it also gives us a better chance to also get back in the game, because more Ws means more ways to play the game, obviously. That's my take on that. With that said, I hope this video helped a lot of you guys. I hope you all enjoyed this style of content. If you guys want to see more, and if you have any topics you want me to explore, please leave in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you guys next time. So peace out and have a great day. Goodbye.